The Energy Transition Podcast takes you directly to the cutting edge of the global energy sector's shift, with a specific focus on the critical role played by oil and gas, as well as the pathways developing around a lower carbon future. Your hosts, Leslie Beyer, Energy Workforce and Technology Council's CEO, and Dan Pickering, founder of Pickering Energy Partners, are joined by Josh Lowry, president of Upright Digital. Each episode engages industry thought leaders in an exploration of market-moving trends and topics, including new technologies, ESG, capital markets, inclusion and diversity, workforce innovation, regulatory influences, and the voice of the people. Join us as the Energy Transition Podcast looks at the state of the traditional energy and oil field service sectors, emerging technologies, and the path ahead in a world of lower carbon energy development.
Welcome to the Energy and Transition Podcast. My name is Josh Lowry. I am joined with my co-host extraordinaire, Mr. Dan Pickering of Pickering Energy Partners. We are coming to you live from the Flecha Azul Podcast Studio in Houston, Texas. And Dan, I always tell you, that's the hardest part of the entire show, is remembering all the things I have to say.
Without a hitch.
And look at the camera. And by the way, that's a good lead-in. We're on YouTube, so if you're listening to this on any of your podcast platforms, go ahead and check us out on our YouTube channel. But anyway, all the pleasantries are done. How are you doing, sir?
I am great. You know, Josh, it's coming on to summertime. The weather's warming up. We've got $110 crude oil as we speak, and a pretty choppy market. So there's opportunities everywhere, and that makes it fun in our business.
So you say opportunities are everywhere, which I agree with, but I imagine you're in a world where you get a lot of panic calls at the same time. You're like, does everybody see it as opportunity, or do people see it as panic sometimes too? Great
question. So the people that see it as panic are the folks who are relatively new to the industry, and we had a point at one last week, Monday, Tuesday, when energy was down 10% in that big market correction. Do you panic on that, or is that the opportunity to own a little bit more? And, you know, I just continue to sleep pretty well at night right now with an energy component at 4% of the S&P 500, and we've got President Biden here in the U.S. on the TV for 45 minutes, which CNBC covers in its entirety, talking about an SPR release and energy security and all these issues. And how is something that's becoming more important and is on more radar screens, and everybody's driving and seeing high gasoline prices, how can that be such a small component of the overall market? So I don't know if the market comes down while energy comes up, or energy just keeps coming up, but it's got to recapture some of the market share that it's lost. And so that I see it as an opportunity, and the people that are panicking create that opportunity.
Yeah.
So, for every buyer, you got to have a seller. So let people panic and bring it on.
Well, I'll tell you what you didn't panic on, once again, is your preparation for these podcasts. You know me well enough now to know that every note you send me is fantastic. This is like the greatest Cliff's Notes I've ever seen in my life. And we've got a great guest today, a great set of questions. I'm going to try to do. I listened to the last podcast. I didn't do enough. I'm going to help you out more.
He's coming in.
I'm coming in.
Get
hot.
Ready, David. Yeah.
Yeah, David. Yeah, there we go. Let's go. We've acknowledged there's someone else in the room.
Yes.
Thank you.
There is someone else.
We could have kept going, David.
Yeah, there is someone else in the room, and I have to tell a funny story about David. So David Phillips is the head of the UK and investor relations at Aker Carbon Capture, which is a Oslo-listed public company, symbol ACC space NO, and it's about a 20 Norwegian kroner stock, and really in a fascinating area. The story I have to tell is that at least twice in my career, I've tried to recruit David to come work with me. He's turned me down every time. I don't know if that makes me just uninteresting or him really smart, but David's a fabulous guy. He's going to tell us about his background, but we're going to hear a lot, I think, about carbon capture. We're going to hear a lot about Europe and what's happening there. And so, David, thanks for being with us. I'm really looking forward to this. Our conversations are always interesting, and this is happening at an interesting time. So So welcome. And Josh has warned you he's coming at you with questions.
Well, and espresso.
Absolutely.
I'm loaded up on espresso and questions here.
Well, as someone who's 6 hours in the wrong way in the time zone, I also am loaded on espresso. So
when did you get in to the States?
Yesterday afternoon.
Oh, yeah. So we really have
we've got a chance to really catch him with his guard down, jet lag.
Well, I think you've got a couple of hours, I think. I'm in the zone now.
Yeah,
if this was like 3 p.m., 4 p.m., then I'd be sort of drifting off all over the place.
There we go. Well, so David, tell us a little bit about you. The way I like to think about it is give us your background.
Sure.
You don't have an accent from Texas, so where'd you grow up? How'd you get in this business? What have you done before showing up at Aker, and then what do you do at Aker?
Sure, great. Well, I think, firstly, thanks for the invite. It's great to see you guys. And also, clearly my British politeness is still there, because even though I have turned Dan down twice, he still invites me back. But no, this is our second trip over the pond in the last, since the pandemic, really. So I must admit, it's actually fantastic to be here in person, to meet people in person, and to get the world back to normal again. That's really, really cool. So me, how did I get into this job? I mean, I joined August last year.
Okay.
I used to work for Aker Solutions, which was the company Aker Carbon Capture was spun out of in 2020. I worked for them between 2014 and 2016 doing IR stuff, but most of my life has been in
IR is investor relations,
yes,
so you're talking to investors all the time.
Absolutely, yep. 100%. Especially in the US, because I remember in that period in 2014 to 16, there was a lot of talk and action around subsea consolidation. So we did a lot of plane miles in that time, talking to investors around the whole offshore and subsea world.
Okay.
But I had a great time there, but most of my life has been in the financial world. So I was an energy specialist at various places in London, had a couple of years in New York as well, in 2016 to 2018, but also was head of research for a major bank in London for the last few years, which was great fun, but the chance to come back to the energy space was too much of a pull. Also, a long time ago, I did a chemistry PhD, which to be honest was useless for about 22 years, until now.
So you're telling me we need to be calling you doctor?
Please.
Nice. The doctor is in the house. You learn something every time. And I didn't realize.
Well, to be honest, the advice I always had was that you be very careful when you use the word doctor. Like if you're talking to your bank, you're trying to get a mortgage, trying to get a loan or something, always use doctor. If you're on a flight, don't, because they'll wake you up and say some guy's sick at the back of the plane.
Yes.
Can you please come and help?
I'm a chemist.
Like, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
I can make him an aspirin if you give me a few hours in the toilet, but otherwise I really couldn't.
Real quick, you said you came back into the energy space with it. What time frame was that?
Really only just when I came back in last year, when I joined Aker Carbon Capture.
On the operating side,
yes,
from
correct.
the financial side.
Yes, correct. Yeah, so it was finance from like when I started in 1998, finance up until 2014, then Aker Solutions, then back to finance again, a bit of time in New York and stuff from 18 to 21, and then back to Aker Carbon Capture, which is sort of the same company, but just having separated in the meantime.
Mm-hmm. And you said, David, for the first time in a long time, your chemistry doctorate is going to come into play. So help us understand why you say that. So what does a chemistry PhD help you with at Aker Carbon Capture, which is obviously another way of asking you, tell us about what the company does.
Yeah, absolutely. And well disguised too. So the science side, very simply, it allows me to understand what we do, because we're all about chemistry-based process engineering that captures CO2 from an exhaust gas, from a flue gas from a plant. And that plant could be all sorts of things. Could be a gas to power plant, could be waste to energy, could be cement, steel, etc. But it's a chemical loop, it's a reversible chemical reaction, and it uses something called amines. Now, amines are a well understood chemical. It's been used,
but not by me.
No, by let's say by at least 1/3 of people in this room.
Okay, right.
It's a well understood chemical. I'll explain it again in a bit more in a second. But that's the technology we have. The majority of our patents that we have around our system are around the actual the chemistry and how we use it, so how it works in the actual process plant. And that sort of patent shield is really the heart of our technology. Now we look at other stuff as well, but that's really the heart of it all. And I guess why does it help having the chemical background? Just to know what goes on, and just to know why certain things are important, and also why they're not. So, for instance, would you spend all your life trying to re-engineer the actual chemistry? No, because the engineering part is massively important, and we moved from the lab to real life 15, 20 years ago, 2008, 2009, around that sort of time frame.
For carbon capture?
Yes, for carbon capture, yes. So we went, having been developing stuff in the lab with various partners in Norway. Very, very, we're lucky having that background, because that gave us a very good basis to sort of really advance the technology with some help from industry, academia, and the government. But moving that, going from a lab, going from like the white coat to the blue coat, going from the lab to the process plant is a massive challenge. And you suddenly find all these physical issues like flow rates and cool spots and hot spots and mixing and all that. It becomes different. It's a different challenge. And that's and going from the lab to a pilot plant that has roughly 1,000 tons of CO2 capture per year. That's a proper little test unit. Going from the lab to that is more difficult than going from the pilot plant to a proper full-scale test unit. And we built one in 2012, again, 10 years ago. It just had its 10th anniversary in Mongstad in Norway, and that's next to a refinery. So we built this plant in 2012, 80,000 tons per year, which at that point was huge. Now it's more like medium size, but that's been used by the whole industry. It's a well-developed, very advanced facility. But going from the test rig to that was less of a challenge in some respects than going from the lab to the test rig. So that whole maturation, if you like, of science to engineering and to actually really doing it is super important.
Was there anything like that in the States in 2012?
Well, it's a good question. So if you look back at the history of this business, I mean, people have used, and back to Dan's chemical or chemistry question, people have used amines as a route to capture CO2 from out of well streams with the main aim to putting the CO2 back in the well to get more oil and gas out.
So I know how I would spell amines. How would you spell amines?
A-M-I-N-E-S.
Okay.
Or without the S if there's only one of them. But we have a good number. We actually have a mixture of but the reason you use that, it's a very simple chemical reaction. You have something that's basic, so the opposite of acidic. You mix that with the CO2, it reacts. So it's not like it sticks to it. It actually reacts to it and creates something else, but it's a reversible reaction. And you pick up the stuff that's reacted. It's a big loop. You pick up the stuff that's reacted, you heat it, not hugely hot, let's say low triple digit centigrade, 150 degrees, that sort of level, maybe a bit less. You heat it, it reverses. The CO2 pops off and the solvent's regenerated. Then you collect the CO2, put it in your tank, and then put it into your network. So it's a well understood process. The issue is though that firstly the amine can escape. So when you mix it, the flue gas or the exhaust gas from the plant's obviously going up at a rate of knots to escape the plant. When you mix that with the amine, you want to make sure it doesn't shoot some of your solvent out of the chimney. So you want to reduce that. And that's both a chemical and an engineering challenge. Yeah. And then you want to reduce the amount of side products, because it's a reaction. And reactions always have side products. And with the exhaust gas, if it's not CO2 and nitrogen, if it's other stuff in there, you can have side products which are often undesirable and can even be dangerous.
Bad stuff.
Yeah. Bad, exactly. And we have a nice little chart on our slide deck that goes from, the solvent goes from like almost clear. So as we always say, it goes from like Pinot Grigio color to conference coffee color. And I remember from my time in a lab, if things go brown when they're in solution, that's not good.
That's bad.
So and when you have a solvent, when you have a system that's really robust, and ours is, it goes from Pinot Grigio to Pinot Grigio. It doesn't change, even over thousands of hours of use.
Yeah, David. So let's take a step back. Carbon capture has become a big deal because we're trying to keep CO2 out of the atmosphere and stop global warming. And so what you're saying is you guys have been doing it for 20 years, and you've gone from the lab to a small facility to the ability to scale up these plants at fairly decent size. And so what you're doing is you're taking something that would be vented otherwise, grabbing the CO2, which we know is the bad stuff. So we're getting the bad stuff. You're using a chemical process to grab it. It drops out the CO2, and then we can go do something with that.
Yes.
And so your business, is all you do is build the plants, or do you transport it somewhere else or inject it, or how does it wind up getting stored?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So we're a technology and engineering company that design and deliver and produce the facilities that capture it. So we start when it comes out of your facility, whatever it is, cement plant, steel plant, etc. We take your exhaust gas, our piece of the pie capture the CO2 and puts it into a storage tank as a liquid, under a certain
on site.
On site. Then typically and this is a very idealized case, you'll explain around the case a little bit, but typically then the CO2, then it's your responsibility as the site owner. What are you doing with it? Are you trying to use it for something? Are you going to try and turn it into a chemical? Are you going to put it into storage, in which case you have to have a link up with transport, all that sort of stuff. Now that's so really what we do is that just that section. We capture the CO2, we store it in a tank as part of the model, the actual design, and then it goes into the rest of the system, and that's your responsibility. Now, having said that, this is an immature industry, and we have a lot of discussion.
Immature meaning what?
Immature, I should say immature value chain, should we say.
Okay.
So immature in terms of, can you point to a good history of projects being developed in this space that work well? No.
Okay. So we're early in terms of
absolutely.
This whole
100%.
inject it somewhere.
Yes, exactly.
Sort of
There are some examples, and again, we're lucky to have the Norwegian heritage because I'll come back to the broader value chain question in a second, but the issue of stuffing it into an old oil and gas reservoir safely, I mean, Statoil, and I use the old name deliberately, has been doing that since the late 1990s into the Sleipner field just off Norway, offshore. They put near on 20 million tons into that since then. Very safe, it's been studied, they've seen how the CO2's moved in the reservoir, very, very well understood system. Done something similar at Snøhvit, which is Snow White, up north, which is the big gas project. There are some examples of how to store it offshore in a oil and gas reservoir, and that's understood quite well. The value chain point, though, is a really important one because no one really knows how it's going to work together in a simple economic.
Because we're so early at this point.
So we have a lot of partnerships across this space. We have link-ups with various players in the shipping space, in the marine shipping, so picking up CO2 from point A, going around the coast, taking it to a terminal that links up to the storage and puts it into the North Sea somewhere. We have link-ups in that space. We have link-ups with other players in the transport space. Because at the moment, everyone's learning. Everyone's trying to work out what is the optimal route. Do you reuse an oil and gas pipeline? If you're lucky enough to have pipeline access, do you build a new one, maybe more efficient? Do you have to, can you store it on site? What other options are available, etc. So I think the whole value chain is still a little bit immature.
Yeah, and we, for listeners of this podcast, our previous guest, Robin Fielder at Talos, is in charge of carbon capture, but she's down on the other end of the spectrum. You guys are capturing it next to the emissions, and she's focused on where to inject it out in those reservoirs. So
I got a question. You say it's immature. Do the clients, potential clients, know that that's available yet? When a steel mill, for instance, that kind of intrigues me. There's a lot of steel mills out there.
Yep.
Are those people aware that this is available to them, especially in Europe?
Yeah, I would think yes, they are. The understanding of what is available is the other question. So back to the point about immaturity, there are not very many companies, if any, who can point towards experience, and I mean an emitter, like a cement plant or someone, who can point towards experience and saying, yes, we worked with carbon capture before, we know what it's about, and we can draw a circle around the economics and everything else. That's a real rarity. So the great majority of customers, both existing and potential, have a very strong interest to do it, to look into how they can do it, driven by a number of things. There's obviously they may or may not have their own net zero strategy already set up. Probably, if they're a public company, if they're a larger player, almost certainly they do. They have government support, so they have both. And Europe's got both carrot and stick. So it's got carrot in terms of there's money you can get to help with your capex, so you can dip into a €1 billion or £1 billion CCUS fund somewhere. There's also support you can get to look at the operational phase. So there is carrot. Stick, there's stick in terms of the carbon price. So there's a CO2 price, which has been widely discussed in Europe, the ETS, also one in the UK as well.
What does ETS stand for?
The European, the Emissions Trading Scheme. And you can look it up on most terminals quite easily. There's an EUA is normally the best way to look for it. There's first 3 letters, EUA. Version in the UK as well, which is slightly higher. That's one. And there's also, you have the famous EU taxonomy, which is a very large, heavy book of regulations around how investors in the financial world should, and I think the corporate world should see itself in terms of categorizing emission footprints and the broader sustainability discussion, full stop. So in other words, if you have a plant that don't capture CO2, you say, okay, I don't really care. I think I'm just going to keep emitting 1 million tons a year. So what could go wrong? Firstly, you have to pay, the current European price is roughly mid-80s.
Mid-80s.
Euros per ton.
Okay.
It has been almost at 100 late last year. euros per ton. It's also been down to below 60 in the spike of volatility early this year around Ukraine and everything else. But if you say, okay, maybe I think it's not going to change, so I'm going to have to pay, let's say, call it 90 euros a ton forever until my plant stops working in 30 years' time or something. So that's a fair check to write every year anyway. Then the price could go up. I mean, if you look at the views in the markets right now, most market watchers see a price of, let's say, high double digit up to 150 euros a ton by 2030. And let's face it, I don't think anyone really knows. but clearly the sense is, looking at the mechanism that Europe uses for its carbon pricing, which is deliberately squeezes the availability of the allowances every year, that long term clearly pushes the price up if you don't change your emission footprint. So that's another thing. You could end up paying more. Then the taxonomy side, if you then get yellow flagged for having a CO2 footprint, having not done anything about it, you then could have issues facing, let's say, the green bond market, or you could have issues with ESG mandated investors, of which, as you know, there are lots in Europe, may have issues holding your stock. So that there are lots of other issues that could come into play to push you towards using it as well as pulling you.
Carrots and sticks.
Yeah.
So they're your potential customers. They're paying something now, and I'd like to talk about that a little bit, because that is not the case in the U.S., correct? And so there's a reason Europe's farther along in this process, because there are some economic incentives to help people change behavior. Okay, so
I might also add, actually, and on the incentives, I didn't mention, Europe has had a particular path to try and develop the whole carbon capture value chain, and that's by supporting industrial clusters or industry hubs. Now, there are already some talk around hubs in the US, especially around Houston, for instance, Louisiana, and so on. But in Europe, there are a number of, and this is the way that Europe's developed, obviously, over the years. There are a number of big industrial hubs, typically basing around chemicals refining, then adding other stuff, power generation, cement, waste to energy, and so on, around large river deltas, where there's access to water and stuff, and access to transport. So you have big hubs in the UK. You have at least 4 or 5 large ones, and 2 of those are what's called Track 1 in the UK government's funding for carbon capture, and that was declared last year. And those are targeting, I'll come back to the details a bit later, but those are targeting storage already in 2025.
Okay.
And maybe also in 2026, but that's when those ones really start up. Europe has got another ones around Rotterdam and other places. Norway, it's a bit of a different angle. They have this big project called Northern Lights, and that's a very much a storage hub, but it doesn't have anything immediately near it, at least not yet. It's more around a deliberate move to show that you can make the value chain work by having transport from other sites in Norway that can take their CO2 by ship from wherever they are. And we're doing one of the plants now, a cement plant in south east Norway. You take your CO2 by ship from that site around the coast and give it to Northern Lights. They store it temporarily, and then they push it into the reservoir. So they have a slightly different hub model. Maybe the way that actually the industry will develop long term. But the main thing about the industrial hubs, it gives governments a big target to aim for. So it means that you can, rather than thinking, we have 50 emitters, all of which have between 500,000 and 1 million tons a year. You said, well, this one site in Rotterdam or Teesside in the UK, for instance, has 10 million tons a year. So the maths become, from a policy perspective, the maths become a bit simpler, and you can aim towards that and say, right, you guys then fight out who's going to get it.
So you wind up with a big concentrated area of CO2 generation.
Yeah,
it's visible, and you can attack it. And the government's basically pushing the folks at Teesside, for instance, or Rotterdam to do these projects. So they're incentivizing them with dollars, you were saying.
Yes.
And there's this carbon cost that they've got already.
Yes.
Okay. And so when you guys show up to talk to a customer, are they talking to only you, and then it's a separate discussion with the transport folks, or are they pulling you all in the room at the same time? I mean, how does a project sort of get off the ground?
No, that's a great question. So this is another reason why the cluster model is quite a good one, because by having a big cluster of, let's say, and I'm making a number up here, but let's say 10 to 15 key big emitters that all join forces, they're all around, let's say they're within 10 miles of this this major industrial site on the on the coast. Firstly, they can share infrastructure. So the whole the localized they can share infrastructure. Yeah. So they can share the pipelines that will take the CO2 from their facility to the terminal, where it'll be then taken off into the North Sea. So there are lots of studies around this. That saves 20, 30, 40% off the infrastructure cost. Just
versus somebody way off.
Oh, just in terms of doing it individually.
Yeah.
So having a shared infrastructure.
I love that idea.
Yeah. So that's a simple one. So it gives you some shared cost, or shared cost saving rather. But yeah, after that, I mean, when we look at what drives the decision, and bearing in mind, net zero targets, government funding, and everything else, when we go and talk to customers, you tend to find the first question is, can you actually do this? I mean, are you credible? Can you actually build this plant? You say a big plant takes 3 years, a modular one takes a year and a half. Well, we want a big one, 2 million tons a year. Can you actually deliver that in 3 years? Or is it going to be, well, it's 5 years because we haven't done one before? Yeah. So first thing is credibility. Second, we want to capture 95% of the CO2. So can you actually, this is the customer talking, not us, can you show us good data to show that, again, you can actually achieve this level? Or is it, well, we aim for 95, but sometimes it's 70 because the wind's blowing from the south or something. You have to have very, very good validity of your technology. So we spend a lot of time working with different specific emitters to try and work to show that our stuff works well. But so it's the next one, the credibility. Can you actually capture 95%? Then it's environment. And on an obvious point, we're doing
real quick. When you say works well, is the number 95%?
Yes.
Okay.
So there is an issue. The way these systems work, and this is a little side comment, if you don't mind, you can capture 99.5 if you want. It just costs more energy. So there's normally a sweet spot where the customer, depending how big the plant is, what it is, what their own ambitions are, they might say, well, look, looking at the energy cost of capturing more rather than less, looking at our emissions footprint, whether it's medium or small or large, we'll aim to capture 90%, and most actually are more like 90. The more common aim is 90%. 95 is more for some of the very big emitters because they specifically want, it seems, I guess, a logical equation. If you have 2 million tons rather than 200,000, if you capture 90 rather than 95, that's a reasonable cost. So you rather try and aim for the high end. Okay. But yeah, the third point, the third big question we get asked is the environmental impact, because you're doing the right thing by capturing CO2, as Dan mentioned right at the very start. What is it? What's the other side of the coin? Is there are we building a legacy of environmental risk for the future, or is this stuff safe? And so if you go back to our origination and all the R&D we did back in the early 2000s, the big emphasis from the government, from our partners, and this is 2008, 2012, that sort of time frame, was to really develop something that is a world beater in terms of the HSE, the health and safety profile. So minimal emissions, virtually no side products, long life, so you can reuse it for thousands and thousands of hours, biodegradable, etc. So those are those targets, rather than purely saying what's the cheapest solution. Mm-hmm. So we're very much moved towards, and that's really we have obviously a number of solvents in our arsenal, but that's really the one that we have as our benchmark, is one that has a very strong environmental profile, and that gets a lot of scrutiny when we go for the real work. Then number 4 is dollars, pounds, and euros. That's when the economics come in.
Mm-hmm. I hear 1 through 4. That's a great explanation of it, and it really is the third one that is. Even when we talked to Robin, referencing her again, when I left that podcast and I listened to this, I wondered, because look, I'm the novice here. I'm the one that really is learning more than anybody. It does feel like, are we just delaying this for someone else? Is there another problem 10 or 20 years from now? And to like Jim Hughes's point, we're solving the 1 through 10% now. Is that a 30 or 40% down the road? I know that's separate products, but so what I just want to be clear. What I'm hearing then is you're saying that there is a viable solution that doesn't cause a problem that our kids are going to have to fix, right?
Yeah. So this is a great topic actually. So the question I think that's maybe seeing more work in progress is the storage environmental picture. So our bit, it's a process engineering, it's wet chemistry, it's well understood, and we've done a lot of work to show that the obvious, let's say, bad points from using that type of chemistry are ring-fenced, are understood, or even negated. So at that point of view, our bit, we can say yes, unless there's a process design problem or our engineering diagram is wrong or something. It should be a very well understood system. Now, storage is different. Storage is interesting, and I had the pleasure of listening to a number of seismologists and geologists talk about this at some events in the UK in the last few months.
Hold on. The pleasure of listening to seismologists and geologists.
I never know who else is listening to this.
Yeah.
Yes, there are 3 people in the audience, one from each company of the speaker.
Right. Yeah,
and
my favorite was a seismologist, definitely, no question.
Somebody's playing that for her husband or wife.
Yeah.
Exactly. Someone likes you.
Yeah.
No, but there's a lot of work around how the CO2 behaves when it's underground. Underground, it's not buried in your back garden. This is 2 or 3 kilometers below the seabed, or a mile or 2 underneath the earth, and so it's proper geological storage. It's not just put in a little reservoir that's in a holding tank, like if you have an outside toilet or something. It's proper deep stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but in that, how does CO2 move when it's in a reservoir is another question. And so back to our Norwegian roots. Who's done a lot of work on this? And I know that many others have, but Norway. So Norway's done a lot of work around, they have 20 years plus data looking at how CO2 has behaved in the Sleipner field. So they have a lot of data around seismic and stuff that's really shown how it moves. And they call it a CO2 plume. So you can track the CO2 and see how it moves. And the thing is, CO2 moves a lot more than oil and gas. So when you're in your reservoir, you think this is over 1 or 2 decades, but it can move from A to B. It can move 15, 20 miles over a few decades. And so if you only understand one little spot of your reservoir, you probably need to understand all of it to make sure that your capping mechanism, whatever rock structure is there to hold the stuff in place, make sure you understand how far that goes. And also licenses. You think you buy, I don't know what size license it would be, you buy your storage license and that gets all approved and stuff. Is it big enough? Because in 30 years time, your CO2 could be under Dan's block, not mine. It could have moved. So there's that. So it's much. I think
that's interesting. Really,
the science around tracking how it moves and the understanding is really interesting.
So CO2 plume.
That's the phrase I heard from my favorite seismologist.
Yeah, I just want to Google that later and that's an interesting, because I know that when the Robin episode airs, that those people are going to have that type of question too. So
yeah,
thank you for
that. I mean, the shape in the Sleipner field, it went up quite quickly over a few years, and then it just took a right turn and went like 10 kilometers over there somewhere.
But the key point here is if we think about the chain here, you're trying to make sure that your facility sort of does no harm, if you will, and that what we have to watch is once it gets in the ground, it stays there, because otherwise you haven't done anything. You haven't spared the CO2 impact, because it gets out and has the impact it may be later, but it happens. So you've got to watch
what's interesting too, Dan, is when I'm listening to him talk about this in the Norway and just Aker's and their position in the North Sea, and if you're an oil and gas guy, which I am and I have been my entire career, you understand what some of these questions they've been asking, where it's been leading to. Because I remember when the phrase ESG showed up in the States just a couple years ago. I mean, I'd never heard it, maybe 3-4 years, I don't know exactly when. But to hear you talk and their mission, this has been a 20-year mission for them. And there's not just yesterday's science. This is decades old science that's answering these questions. That's really, it's comforting actually. And it explains a lot, like why they've been pushing on all this stuff.
Yes. Absolutely. Now, I mean, and I think if we go back to our roots, there's the Norwegian, they called it a moon landing strategy. That was the sort of the pre-2010 deliberate policy move. Now, it didn't actually accelerate past 2012, 13, 14, because, as you well know, the world took its foot off the carbon capture gas pedal a little bit, to put it politely. But yeah, the whole point was to throw is the wrong phrase, invest a lot of policy and financial support.
Well, and you mentioned that it took it off the gas, because oil was 140 in 08, 112 in 12. It's back up to about 112 now, but it doesn't feel like they've taken it off this time.
Not at all. If anything, and now I'm sure you probably want to discuss how the world's maybe changed this year.
Sorry, Dan, I have no idea where I'm your questions.
But even, excellent, my plan worked.
Yeah, that's right.
Given you told me in advance, I try and answer 1.5 questions each time, so you have no idea which one we're on. But on the, obviously I'm sure you guys want to talk a little bit about how the world's changed this year. But even before that, the one phrase that stuck to our mind is this thing is accelerating. this whole theme is accelerating. The policy support is delivering. So a government says, in the UK, for instance, we're going to choose our track 1 clusters to put funding towards. You're going to aim for 2026. Okay, that's all talk. Then you get to the point and you do it. And you say, okay, we've now decided it's this and that one. We're going to decide which projects next year, but we're aiming towards 2026. And actually, the UK, as many countries have done, actually upped their targets. They had 10 million tons per year of CO2 storage by 2030. That's now between...
That was their goal.
That was the old one. It's now between 20 and 30. And then heading towards 50 plus by the middle of the decade, next decade. So there's a lot of... The ambition has clearly been moving in the right direction. And even just in the last few weeks, the last few months, Denmark has stepped up its ambition. Holland and the Netherlands has put potentially a few billion euros towards carbon capture as part of a broader renewables and energy push as well. And just recently, Europe's stepped up and come up with some more details around its new policy as well. So that it feels that the momentum is very much still there. And if anything, from the financial world, with my investor relations hat on, I would say the interest we've got now is deeper and more genuine than it was 6 months ago.
So I have to just take a stop on this conversation because this is really an important point of why this podcast even exists. There's a lot of places you can go for energy and transition conversations, news places you can go read. But one of the reasons that Dan and I and one of our other hosts is Leslie Beyer wanted to do this was we have a very large oil and gas following. And there's people in that world that they're great and we work with them. They're our biggest customer, my biggest customers, I'll speak for myself. And there's people that just don't know what's actually going on in the broader scheme of things. And what I didn't want and what we didn't want was for people that didn't understand oil and gas, foundation to think that an ESG or a carbon capture world was either A, going to put them out of business, or B, something that was just, kind of out in the ethos people were talking about but wasn't really happening. And when I listened to you talk, directly from Europe and going to this, this depth of 10 and 20 year history here, this is actually happening, and it doesn't displace a lot of what the world needs for energy use now. It adds to, hey, we are finding solutions to take care of issues that matter. And I really am talking to the audience on this one. I want the audience to understand that these things are happening. This world is developing and evolving and changing, and it shouldn't be as scary to the people of that the world that we've serviced in the past. Like, this is the exact audience I want to grab here and say, you're listening, here's what's going on, we're moving in this direction, pay attention because it's actually happening. I'm glad you have your when you mentioned your finance background, your the world of oil and gas, and then how you're able to blend these. Like, you really are a trifecta of the three people that need to matter. I'd say three people, the three entities that need to care about this. Yeah,
I think. Thank you for saying that. I think it's a great point. I think from our side, we're privileged to have that heritage, and also we're doing it now. We're delivering a large plant in Norway on a cement plant, capturing 400,000 tons. That's ready in 2024.
I'm stopping you there because let's try to put things in context. So you said the UK had a goal of capturing 10 million tons per year by 2030.
Correct.
And now that's a bigger number.
Yes.
It's 20 or 30 million tons per year.
Yeah.
So we've got 10 in our mind. 10 million tons per year is a ambitious goal. So now let's come back and talk about, so this one project you're working on is 0.4 million tons per year. So you need 25 of these to hit the goal by 2030. So again, I'm just trying to put things in perspective from a sizing perspective. So an individual project might be half a million tons per year to a million tons.
It's quite a range, actually. I mean, this is
talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So the range is from one angle daunting, and the other angle amazingly a great opportunity, because one of the reasons and this is a short answer about the chemistry side, one of the reasons people use amines is because they can work across a very broad range of emitters, because not one plant is the same as another. So different plants, different industries have different levels of CO2. So
because of the gases they're putting off.
Yes, exactly. So if you have gas to power, in your exhaust gas, you probably have 3, 4, 5% of CO2. That's the low end. If you have waste to energy, more like 8 to 10, If you have
8 to 10%.
Yes.
CO2.
So twice the amount. If you have a cement plant, you can be towards 20%, maybe 18, 20%. If you're doing blue hydrogen, so that's making hydrogen as part of a refinery, but then capturing the CO2, that could be 25 or even 35%. So there's quite a range. And now the reason, why would you want to, the technology that we use, and we have I would like to think a pretty refined version of that, is because it can work effectively across all of those. Yeah, exactly.
So it can grab a really thick CO2 stream.
Yes.
It can grab a really thin CO2 stream.
Now, if you have a very, and this is a slightly different topic, but if you have a very, very high level, let's say 35, 40% under some pressure, which some modern hydrogen plants can do, then you might be able to use a physical method rather than chemicals. You might be able to just simply freeze it out using cryogenics, and that's what the industrial gas companies tend to do.
Okay.
But that's a slight side comment. More to the point about the customers out there. So it means that when we talk to companies about I have a waste to energy plant, or I have a smelting plant, or I have a pulp and paper plant, the question is often not so much what do you do, but where are you? So if you're within 50 miles of a industrial cluster that's growing in the UK, northeast, northwest, Rotterdam, along that whole industrial river area in northern Europe. If you're in Norway and you can link up to Northern Lights by some marine transport, that's interesting. And you big green lights and charge ahead and get some studies done and maybe use our mobile test unit and really follow it up. If you're in the wrong place, though, you have to sort of decide and work out. Okay, so what the challenge is not putting carbon capture onto your cement plant in the south of Spain, Dan. It's how do you get it? Yeah, exactly. And the obvious route is, well, okay, so you can get it to the coast. Well, okay, that's not a big challenge. But how much does it cost to ship it from there to Northern Lights, or from there to one of the big projects in the UK? Don't really know yet. Well, we have some ideas, but that's another immature side of it. But that said, there are a number of players who are looking to invest in vessels. And these are not LNG-sized tankers. These are coastal vessels that will do sort of a bus stop or a Uber ride or a taxi ride around the coast, picking stuff up from A to B and dropping it off at the terminal when they've collected enough. It's growing, and actually part of Northern Lights, they actually have 2 vessels on order to deliver in 2024, because that's their whole model. But we have link ups with a company called Dan Unity CO2 in Europe. We have a link up with Höegh LNG, which is another shipping company in Norway. They are all looking to invest in this vessel market. So the transport piece, how you play that marine transport piece, is for Europe especially, is a very important part, and it's starting to see some activity now.
So it's in Europe, you think it's less likely to be buried pipelines under the ground and much more likely to be,
I think, well, for the ones the way it's developing at the moment, given we have these big clusters, and given that all the storage is talked about so far is offshore, and that's old oil and gas fields and something called a saline aquifer, which is a big sandstone reservoir offshore. Given that's the target, the coastal terminal based model with some marine transport pickup seems to be the way to go. I think the idea also, don't forget, Europe has a lot of people in not too big a place. So versus North America, we don't have the network of pipelines that we can run. There obviously are some of them going east maybe use less than they were in the past. You never know, but certainly the ones that are existing right now, there is some room to repurpose them, but we haven't got the same scale of network that you guys have in North America. Okay. And the idea of building new ones, well, it's not as easy in Europe.
Yes, yeah.
That's the short answer.
You're going to have people fighting that.
Oh, yeah.
So let's go back to your cement plant. So we're doing 400,000 tons a year.
Yes.
And so just walk us through, when did that project start? How long does it take to build your facility? What's the customer spending to do that? And so just kind of take us through the project.
Yeah, sure. So the project's with so it's called Brevik CCS, and the customer is Norcem, so Heidelberg Cement in Norway. It's an old plant. It's been there for over 100 years, and so this is a brownfield project. It's not building a brand new shiny stainless steel polished finish new one. This is working on an old plant. which makes it challenging. It makes it any brownfield project. You always have less room to maneuver and to, let's say, to modularize the process than if it's a greenfield. Anyway, but no. So this was decided. It was awarded. We spun out in 2020. The project was officially awarded late 20, and we started work in early 2021. So this aims to finish by and be ready to go by mid to late 2024. That time frame, and that links up with Northern Lights. So, and Northern Lights storage, the first phase of their storage, is 1.5 million tons per year of CO2 into their reservoir, starting 2024. So that's what it's aligned with. The actual project itself, and this is a slightly longer delivery. It's the first one of its kind in terms of this type of brownfield project. First one of its kind. It's starting 2021, ending sort of mid to late 2024. You can do the maths on that one. Roughly, we would say a large plant where there is some level of bespoke work is roughly 3 years delivery, something like that. And that's the full engineering and procurement and fabrication and on-site installation and stuff. Okay,
and so and what can you tell us about how much the customers spending to get this plant, and how much? So 400,000 tons a year, we know that would cost them.
Yeah. In
their CO2 costs. So how long does it take for this to pay out for them?
Yeah. No, very good question. I mean, bear in mind that this is, as it's part of Northern Lights, there's very strong government support in Norway for this whole project. And so there is some help from that. But from our perspective, our contract is 1.7 billion kroner.
Okay. How many dollars is that for us?
It's roughly 8.
Okay.
Roughly 8.
8 to 1?
Yes.
So 1.4 billion divided by 8.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. My P-brain is getting me to call it 100.
1.7, sorry, 1.7 billion.
1.7 billion.
Yeah.
Not 1.4, 1.7 billion. So 200 plus million dollars.
Something like that, yeah. And our segment of it is roughly. Yeah, well done. He's still got it. He's still got it.
The sweat beads.
I know.
It's like, oh God, I'm gonna embarrass myself with a number here.
I think I should have thought of this. I should frame some more mental maths.
Live on air.
So if we had 4 of these projects, one starting in 24, and one starting.
You're trying to go from point A to point B.
Yeah. Which plant gets built first?
Yeah, that's right.
But it's a great idea, actually. I think I'll do that. But anyway, so our section is 1.7 billion kroner. That's roughly half of the value of the entire project. Okay. Now it's this is probably, when you do the maths on that, I won't ask you to do it live now.
Please,
maybe in a few minutes' time, give you time to think about it and worry. But when you do the maths on that, that's not going to be a good representation of how these plants will evolve over time, because it's first up, it's brownfield, it's complex, there's very little modularity in it. And one of the key aims of our whole engineering design is to modularize stuff. As you well know from everyone knows from the background in oil and gas, if you go from like a plant that's not modular to one that is, you probably save 25-30% just like that. And particularly in the installation phase, you really de-risk that, because you just have to hook things up. You turn up with big lumps of kit, you put them on site, make sure they're in place and link them up. You don't have to build it on site. And that makes a huge difference. Our smaller units, the one we're delivering in the Netherlands for Twence, which is a waste to energy plant, that's modular. So that's 100,000 ton per year, much smaller. Effectively, it's the great grandchild of the test plant in Norway. It was built in 2012. So it's 90% smaller in terms of its footprint, and also 90% smaller in terms of its cost. Now that's modularization, same chemistry. That's just the engineers doing what engineers do.
And what's the time frame on that?
That's an 18-month delivery, or just over 18 months.
No, from the 90%.
Oh, from 2012 to when we appeared in 2020.
See, that's unbelievable. That's a big,
Now
dramatic
you could say that if the market we're seeing right now had appeared in 2018, could we have delivered it then? Probably. But we're obviously following the demand. And given how slow CCS was, or CCUS was, since 2012, we had a lot of time to do engineering designs. So a lot of work done around this modular design. But ultimately, 100,000 ton unit, we'll be able to deliver that in 18 months. And our aim is to really reduce that in the future. Once we may have got the design sorted, plus or minus, but we haven't got the supply chain sorted yet, because we haven't built many of them yet. So once you go forward, and let's say we built, let's say this is our 15th you know how it works. Learning by doing. We're going to be, the cost will be lower, I'm sure, but also the delivery time is going to be down towards, we hope towards 12 months.
Mm-hmm. So much faster cycle over time. We saw the same thing. Shale boom wells cost 15 million. They went to 7 million as everybody got smarter on doing them. So talk to us about, you've got the 2 projects you just mentioned that add up to half a million tons per annum.
Yep.
What are your goals for this business,
Mm-hmm.
and what's your backlog look like? Help us understand who's in the customer mix.
Sure,
that sort of
absolutely. No. So the goal, we have one ambition or one aim, which we published when we separated out in 2020, and that's to secure contracts to cover in total 10 million tons of CO2 capture per year, per annum, by 2025. Now, is that January the 1st or December the 15th? Yeah, let's wait and see. But by 2025, we want to have signed contracts, so firm contracts, not feeds or early engagements or studies, but firm contracts to cover. And as you're right, it's rightly said, we've done 500,000. So we've done half out of 10. Now, if you look at how our sort of radar screen spreads out, so we have, if you look for, so let's say going from left to right, left-hand side, if you can visualize, this is one of our slides, which is why I can visualize it quite easily. But if you can visualize it, 500,000 tons is, if you like, firm contracts, those two contracts. Then we have 4 million tons per year in feed, in the front end engineering design phase. And so we have half a million tons of firm projects, 4 million tons of feed, and we rather hope that those will get the green light and will move to firm contracts next year. Those are both big ones, obviously. Then we have a bit over 5 billion tons in what we call, per annum, in what we call studies and tenders. So areas where we are currently engaging with customers to talk about contracting models, options, pricing, all the rest of it. Then we have, and those, can you say, do those all arrive in 2023? Probably not. You got to think about when the storage starts. But that's a good pipeline of stuff to look at. Then we have what you call our sort of more blue sky radar screen of prospects. So where we had interaction with someone somewhere who said, "Can you build a plant on my facility?" And that's north of 20 million tons per year. So that's a good sized pot of people who have been addressing, and there's a good mixture in that. I would say mostly those are between modular size, so 100,000 tons, up to perhaps 1 million.
Okay.
And I imagine that growth has been substantial. When you say, here's what we're doing, here's what we're talking to, and here's people that have reached out. That I feel like that curve is going up dramatically.
Yeah, I think, and what you want to see, like any sort of cascade diagram, whether you're a biotech company looking at your drugs in development, or whether you're looking, carbon capture company looking at your prospects, you want to see stuff move from the right to the left. You want to see prospects become tenders become feeds, or even jump straight over and become real projects. Now, what we saw actually between end of last year and end of this last quarter, so end of March, was of the prospects, another couple of million tons per year moved from prospects to tenders. So that was 3 and a bit, now became 5 and a bit. Does that happen every quarter? Probably not. But it shows you that there's a lot of stuff that's active. And when it's a tender, and back to, I think we mentioned early on, there's a lot of inquiries out there. So you have to be a little bit realistic sometimes and say, do you want to engage and spend some engineering man hours on a project that won't happen for probably 5-6 years because it's just in the wrong place? And that will never become a tender because it's not going to happen for a few years. So the tenders are the ones that could happen. So it's a bit more realistic.
And what pushes someone from thinking about this to acting? Is it they're getting dollars from the government? Is it the CEO says, "Wow, I really got to do something about net zero"? I mean, what's driving it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So what actually triggers this? I think there's no one answer. I mean, it is in the background. You definitely have a CEO and a board that says we need to accelerate or deliver on our net zero plan, no question. Outside that, the government funding is very important. It's always a key part of the machinery to get it moving. But to be honest, I think it's the credibility around the whole project. It's not when you're looking at let's say Dan Pickering's a gas to power plant in northeast England somewhere. It's a big emitter, 2 million tons a year. So you're committed.
Of course, I own a plant that has big emissions.
Yeah, exactly. And you're really keen to do it. But what stops you? I mean, you have a board behind you. Everyone is really keen to deliver and get this done. So what are you worried about? Well, firstly, you're worried about, if I invest in this right now, It's going to take, I need to do like a feed for a year, 3 years to build it. So it's going to be ready in like 2025, 26. Okay. Storage is 2026. Okay. All right. That seems realistic. How do I know that's going to happen in 2026? Am I going to build a plant and then find the storage is not even ready yet? So that's one thing. How do you get, what's the credibility around the whole storage platform?
When can you actually turn it on?
Exactly, 100%. So when can you actually turn it on to start capturing the CO2? Then I think you have questions around that question. That's probably the most important one, because without the storage, all the other letters in that acronym won't work. So and that question is, storage is environmental stuff. You know, the environmental understanding around the actual reservoir. It's the transport and storage model for the actual project developer. So the guys who are owning that storage machine, if you like, you know, how are they working out? What's their contract for difference structure, their CFD structure around the economics for storing it? And that's going to be a regulated industry, of course. But how's that going to work? And although so lots of steps along that, and if you're going to be in charge of effectively, you know, pushing the big button on $1 billion investment, or maybe even more, then you need to be quite sure that things are going to be aligned when it's ready. So I think it's a bit of a sort of a virtuous circle. There are lots of parts of that whole machine that you want to see credible, supported, happening, all the rest of it.
Spending $1 billion is not a trivial decision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That makes sense. So your backlog's building, customer inquiries are up. So Russia, Ukraine, potential recession in Europe hasn't really slowed any of these dynamics.
It has. It certainly changed them. I think the net result, I don't think, it's really hard when something's growing already. It's hard to say, has the rate of change changed? It's still growing, and we have had more inquiries in the last few months than we had in the previous few. So that, from that point of view, it appears to have not affected the momentum in particularly. I think it's changed it in some ways, because obviously there's been a lot of chat around how are European governments going to, in general, and I'm not a policy specialist by any means, but how are they going to change their structure of financing and support for renewables and the whole transition, given the move away from Russian gas, given the accelerating push towards renewables, etc. And in that, where does carbon capture feature? Yeah. So from one angle, is there going to be more hydrogen earlier? Yes. So that's clearly one ambition. So as part of that, and yeah, the big game, of course, is green hydrogen, but as part of that, the supporting act is blue. And so the blue hydrogen, which is hydrogen from hydrocarbons with carbon capture, clearly has seen some acceleration. That's probably the most obvious one, with some chicken and egg question around it, because that market in big scale is not there yet. But nevertheless, that's one I think that has seen some acceleration. Outside that, the carbon market, and this is pretty much hot off the press news from yesterday. The European Parliament and the EC, European Commission, they've also had some important decisions and policy publications around how they're going to support renewables, and they talked about actually increasing the ambition, even in this energy cost environment, increasing it, not decreasing it. The only piece I think that affects our market directly really was saying they're going to, out of the allowances that go into the European carbon price mechanism, they potentially will look at issuing a few more in the very, very short term to alleviate some of the initial pressure right now in the market. I think the carbon price was down a few % on the news. It wasn't a major move. But that's what I mean. But the long-term ambition and the machinery around the trading scheme, the CO2 market and so on, is still very much there. And if anything, they've actually tightened. The long end has actually tightened more. Just the short end has become slightly easier.
Okay. So you now have this backlog that you're going to start building facilities. Do you then own them, and the customer gas comes through it, and you charge a toll, or do they own them, or how do guys pay for this?
No. So the main mechanism is we design, engineer, build it, hand it over, as you would do with any large project delivery, and say, okay, here we are. There's obviously customer owns it. There's obviously some level of performance guarantee for a few years. As a contractor, we'd have a long-term operation and maintenance agreement with them. So there's some income from that and some long-term link up. But they own it. Now the exception is we have this capture the service model that we introduced last year. Now we haven't got a contract in this space yet using this model.
So this is an idea.
But it's been launched commercially. A lot of discussions. We hope to have something done later this year, maybe early 2023. Very simply, it's us turning up with some friends to manage the transport and storage, and a financial partner to manage the financial cost of the actual asset for our piece, for the carbon capture piece, particularly going to a smaller emitter who maybe doesn't have enough firepower financially, maybe doesn't have enough engineering skills in-house, all that sort of stuff, and say, look, if we can turn up and do this on a 20-year, 25-year contract.
Turnkey basis.
Exactly.
So pay us per ton captured.
Per ton captured, linked to the carbon price, but it could be linked to it in all sorts of ways. And we deliberately the ambition is to accelerate the deployment of carbon capture with smaller emitters. And given that, you don't want to say, oh, we're only going to do fixed price, or we're only going to do market rate. We keep that open. I mean, that should be more their perception of let's say, market risk that would dictate that. But we could do something linked to the carbon price in the market. So it would go up and down. Or we could have a floor and a ceiling to manage the risk, or we could have long-term fixed. Now, this is only discussion so far, but as an indication, I would say most, and not everyone, but the majority of people we've spoken to so far, they seem to like the idea of long-term visibility. So it seems to the idea of low triple-digit carbon price fixed for 20 years is maybe not a bad compromise. Mm-hmm. But it's a bit, again, proper first-in-kind business model, and it's a bit of an obvious comment, but when you have smaller companies, they aren't only looking for help for our piece, they're looking for help for the entire project. So there are lots of moving parts.
I don't see how that's not a winner, really.
Doesn't that, I mean, just like buying the car that you own for 10 years is cheaper than leasing a car for 10 years.
Right.
But if you buy the car, you got to come up with all the money up front. If you lease it, you can turn it back. There's some advantages to it, but it seems like the carbon capture as a service would be slightly more expensive to the customer, but a hell of a lot less hassle, because they shift the hassle onto the partners.
Doesn't the customer only win when everybody wins? I mean, it's like you're paying for a percentage of what they're capturing, correct? It's kind of like, I mean, it really is, I'm paying you to collect this. We're both going to win.
Yes.
And then I'm essentially paying just a portion of
totally
what you saved me.
And what is interesting though is, as part of this, obviously we've been talking to lots of potential financial partners as part of the whole value chain. We have been inundated. I mean, you can think of every possible type of institution that could chase this. I mean, we've had infra funds, private equity,
infrastructure funds.
Yes, infrastructure funds, private equity, sovereign wealth, and so on, as a full range. Actually, to be honest, the most flexible money so far has been coming all from the East. So Japan, Singapore, there's a lot of long-term money there that's really keen to invest in green infrastructure. And actually, the appetite, I mean, in terms of the volume of money available, it's clearly more than we could ever need or dream of. Sometimes the challenge is our industry, as you mentioned a few times, is immature. So someone comes having put $1 billion into some huge pipeline in Asia and says, great, so how big is your industry right now? Well, we're just starting out. So there's a bit of a scale challenge sometimes. But certainly we found a lot of the big infrastructure funds, especially, and some of the really super long-term money from the Far East, is very happy to get in now early and wait, and actually aren't worried about 5-year exits. They're in there for 10, 20 years. And what we've also found is that we've started a discussion saying we're looking for a partner to finance the carbon capture piece, a certain slice of the overall cost. Quite a few guys have said to us, what about the rest? We'll do it all. So the funding availability seems to be, unless I haven't mentioned price or cost of capital yet, of course, but the availability seems to be pretty optimistic.
I'd almost feel like you'd have better success with the people that have shorter exit plans on that model you just mentioned. Less cash flow up front.
Could be.
Yeah.
David, are we going to see, I mean, your business right now is exclusively Europe from what I read in the materials and the stuff you have on your website. So that's your home, that's your area of focus right now. Does it make sense to do what you're doing in the US or other spots?
Oh yeah, great question. 110%. There's an immense opportunity in North America. I think the very simple 30,000 foot view is it's not a matter of if, it's just when.
Okay.
And which year do we get in? Who do we partner with, and everything else? And I think it's very much for us the policy momentum, the types of customers, the types of emitters. You know, most of our customers in Europe are global companies, whether they're cement or oil and gas or whatever else. And so we have good link-ups with global companies on the customer side. We have good link-ups with global supply chain players like Siemens Energy. So we're very, very keen to investigate North America. And I think we talked about this a little while ago in a previous set of earnings. We're already having some good dialogues with possible partners. And I think what's clear to us, we have to have boots on the ground in a major way. We have to have a good partner who can really be prepared to invest and to get a project to work. And we're currently working out, what options are on the table, and there are a number. You've mentioned, looking at the E&P part of the value chain, and obviously they have great storage visibility and knowledge. There's also the pipeline guys, midstream players. There's also parts of the supply chain. Do we piggyback someone else in that space, or do we work with a financial partner? It's a good little opportunity. I think it's definitely a matter of timing. And I think from our perspective, I think that what we've seen in Europe, it really pays to be early to show it works. To be with a credible model, rather than waiting for the very, very best chance, by which time you're 5 years late. I think being early in the next few years is going to be the way forward.
And I guess similar to Europe, the ability to do something with the carbon that you capture is going to be important. So that injectivity piece will also matter for the time.
Well, no, I mean, I'm not you guys know a lot more than I do about what goes on the subsurface in North America, but especially in the lower 48. But there's the US has got some great advantages. You've got a massive pipeline network, a lot of which can be reused. You have onshore storage. As you know, if you even think about going near the sea, things get double the cost, if not more. So that's a great advantage to have that. It means you can look at a lot of storage potentially being behind the fence. So you don't have to worry so much about doing it in your garden or something. You don't have to mess up your Saturday barbecue with some guy drilling to store some CO2 in your lower fields. So there's a lot of ambition.
I like it. Not in my backyard. That's
exactly
the fence.
Literally. What about the competition? Who else is doing this?
Quite a few people. So we look at it in there's sort of three groups really. There's the group we talked a lot about, and your questions early on were, what do we face when we chase work? Well, it's all about credibility. Can you deliver this, everything else? So there's a lot of engineering skill you need to be able to do. So firstly, the guys who are engineers and the chemists. So you have your nice technology solution, and you have the big engineering muscle to actually design it and deliver it and everything else. So that's ourselves. It's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, MHI. It's Fluor, your engineering friends over here, and also it's Shell, Shell Cansolv, so Shell, the oil company, and they work with Technip Energies as their EPC player. So those are the four main guys, and we see them pretty much most of the main jobs we look at in Northern Europe. Then you have the industrial gases. So Linde, Air Liquide Air Products. As you might guess, they've been doing this for a long time. They know a lot about handling CO2, liquid gas. They have a great experience in working with handling gas around steel plants, hydrogen plants, refineries, and so on. They already have a presence in this space. They've been using amine scrubbers, and the scrubber is a simple machine just to take your CO2 out of your gas stream, your chemical stream. And they have some big ambitions. Linde and BP talked about some pretty big plans over here around Houston to capture. I think it's a pretty big number, which is 10 or 15 million tons of CO2 or something per year, ultimately by the late this decade. So some big ambition around that space. So the gases are it looks like they are rather more looking at their installed base and expertise. So hydrogen, refineries, chemicals, and steel. Maybe not the wider industry spectrum that we would look at along with the other guys. Then you have all the startups and smaller companies, and there are a lot in that space. Mostly they're not public yet. So there are a couple of exceptions. There's CO2 Capsule in Europe. Other than that, most of them are private companies, and they're a mixture. Some of them are really exciting technology-focused startups that are working on technology that is genuinely new. It's only been dreamt up in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. Low level of what's called technology readiness, that TRL, technology readiness level index. It's a bit on from someone having the eureka bathtub moment, but they haven't really moved from the lab to real life testing yet. Then there are some who are looking at early stage testing with new technology, but are still a long way off really commercializing it. Then there are guys who are looking at older technology that didn't work 10, 15 years ago and are trying to reinvent it and get it to work in the field by using engineering skills to change the way it works. And that's the one where we see probably most activity, is because that's why would you want to use a different technology? It's to lower the cost. And potentially, there are things off the shelf like potassium carbonate, which is a very simple, basic chemical, literally basic, the opposite of acidic. If you can use that in some way, that's cheap, easy, well understood, and also is pretty unharmful, pretty non-toxic. So, unless you ate a lot of it. So, from that point of view, there are ways that if you could use someone like that, then that would be interesting. But these are all looked at in 2010, 11, 12, and they didn't work because in the lab they look promising. When you go to real life, I mentioned, early on in this discussion, we had the challenge of going from the lab to the test plant was a big challenge. When you do that, you realize that most of this stuff doesn't work fast enough. If it doesn't work fast enough, you're never going to be able to use it on a 100,000 million ton per year plant. So that's the aim that these guys are chasing now. Is that can they re-engineer it in some way using? And there's normally a trade-off. Normally you need to maybe use more heat, so more energy. Maybe you need to use more pressure, again, more energy. So there are engineering tweaks to see if you can get some compromise or get it to work. But so far, and then some of these guys have got some innovation funding from the EU, so there's some real work going on. But yeah, that's how we see the landscape panning out.
And what milestones have you set for yourself? You talked about the 10 million tons per annum of projects by 2030. What?
By 2025.
2025.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I was not giving you enough credit. So, what other things should we be watching to sort of measure the progress of our?
Well, it's we have that the 10 in 25 is the main aim.
Okay.
We have yet. I mean, we're not quite 2 years old yet. We haven't come up with too many other public stepping stones yet. I mean, obviously internally we have a very key list of target contracts that we want to try and secure.
Certain customers,
exactly,
projects,
regions, customers, etc. And but yeah, the achieving that work. And the thing is, it's in some respects our market is quite an easy one to analyze because so long as you ignore CCU, which is where you would use the CO2 in something like making chemicals or making fuels or something, then it's all about storage. So when does the storage start? If it starts in 24, and it takes 18 months to order a small plant, you're going to order one maybe this year or next year. If it's a big one that starts in 2026, you're going to order it next year. Yeah. So those timelines are very visible and gives us something to aim for.
So ironically, some of your milestones aren't actually your own. They're the industry milestones.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What else do you think are hot button topics that we ought to talk about? We get to this point, and I always start itching for the lightning round. But what do you got, Josh?
Well, honestly, I'm glad you asked it. That's a great. What else do we need to know? I think hopefully that's somewhere you were going. But also, are there any other books, publications, podcasts? Where can we go? Where can our audience go to learn more and just become more educated in this?
It's a great question. There are a lot of reports on the energy transition that refer to CCS. I'm sure you'd be sport for choice for that. Most of the big consultants, quite a few of the big banks that have written some good reports, but they tend to cover everything, including CCS. The ones I would say are the Global Carbon Capture and Storage Institute, the GCCSI. They have a great operations.
Say that slower. GCCSI.
And like all acronyms,
stands for
the Global Carbon Capture and Storage Institute.
Okay.
And they do some great reports. They quite regularly have like a global status of CCS update. They did a technology review quite recently. Their stuff is a good read. It's just the level of detail that doesn't, if you're not an engineer or something, it doesn't like completely send you in shock.
We're talking with a PhD chemist here, so it's a great read.
Exactly.
You guys will understand.
Right. My insomnia just went away.
Yes.
But no, so the GCCSI, definitely one. That's probably one of the main ones I think about, actually. If you think about all the guys we read reports on, they're a specialist institute, obviously, given the name, and they do have a good focus and a good grasp of what's going on. Okay. And you can do a lot worse than looking at some of their stuff.
So that's the Get Smart. Yeah. Okay.
Now we're ready for the lightning round. And Dan, you do a great job on these. You not only mix them up for each guest, but you recognize that we have a European with us.
Yes.
I should point out, though, there was a vote in 2016. I'm not quite sure if we can still say European.
Okay.
That's right. Okay, Josh, why don't you kick it off?
True.
So the rules here, David, are you get to say you get to say yes or no or provide the answer, but you don't get to expound on it.
I'm banned from this game because I don't know how to do the one-word answer.
It stands on its own. So
Yes.
lead it off.
If that's, can I just, before you launch off, if I can ask the judge, if I have an answer that's a bit unusual, am I allowed to like use one phrase to explain
You have
it?
no
Yes.
rules. You can do whatever you want.
Yes.
Really, we just tell you
Right.
that. He's really talking to me when he says that. He's like, just stop giving multiple word answers.
Obviously some previous here. You can tell, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
PTSD.
Yeah, we need you to subscribe to the podcast to listen. This is.
yes. Go.
And next week we'll cover. Yeah.
You want me to start?
Yeah.
Okay, you ready? How do
Yeah.
you feel? You feel pretty good?
I'm good. I'm ready to go.
You
He's
loose?
ready.
Okay, here we go. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
I wasn't. I'm sorry to stop it. I was expecting something different.
Actually, that's a good point. So have you written down answers? Because you should write down your answers and let's see who's going to score the best.
I would have said tea for you, but you've said coffee. Sadly, we can't go back.
You called me European, so I mean, if it's European, there's a good coffee link. If I said English, well, that's afternoon tea, isn't it?
Yes.
But European coffee, espresso.
Okay. Oh man.
So you both have crushed the
one
rules
word answer.
with the first
Going
question.
well so far.
You both have
sorry.
violated. I feel so violated right now.
All right. Coffee or
Terrible.
tea? You go coffee. Got it.
Okay, cash or crypto?
Cash.
Oslo or Amsterdam?
Oslo. And my short disclaimer is, you never know who's listening.
Yes.
That's right. The bosses love that one. Chelsea or Manchester United?
I'm actually a rugby guy, so I don't care.
Fair enough.
Bangers and mash or salmon?
Bangers and mash.
And tell our audience what bangers and mash are.
Do I have to?
Yes. I know.
Sausage and mashed potato, but it's a particular sort of sausage. It's normally with gravy as well.
Yeah.
So sausage served in a big pile of mashed potato with gravy on the
We're
side.
around lunchtime right now. That sounds
I
pretty
know,
good.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's very good. Typically, you serve it after if you've been to like watch a football match, and I mean soccer. Sorry, I should explain that. You mean a soccer match, or you used to sit in a pub and have many drinks and have your bangers and mash.
Okay. You're up?
Oh, will the world make net zero by 2050?
Yes.
He gives himself that awesome question, and he gives me this one. Puppies or kittens? I'm sorry.
That's
for that.
easy. Puppies. I'm a dog guy through and through.
French Riviera or the Italian Riviera?
Italian.
S&P 500 for the rest of 2022. Bullish or bearish?
Bearish.
Okay. Wind or solar?
Wind.
Facebook or Netflix?
Netflix.
Okay. Do you expect a consistent global carbon tax before 2030?
I think you do mix up the serious ones
That's
with
right.
the
Yes.
cheeky ones.
Get it
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
No.
Okay.
Will there be a consistent global? Oh, that's you. Over under for first meaningful Gulf Coast CCUS injection by 2025.
After 2025.
He's taking the after. Okay. Downton Abbey or Benny Hill?
That's easy. Downton Abbey. I bear in mind that I always assume that anyone over this side of the pond thinks that that's how we live anyway.
Right, in big castles.
Yeah.
So have you gotten
Big
into this
Castle
show,
staff.
this Downton Abbey?
I watched a few seasons.
My wife dragged me into it. I was like, what is this? I loved it. The grandma's amazing.
She's a star.
They're making a movie out of
Maggie,
this thing.
yeah,
now.
Maggie
Second one.
Smith. It
Oh,
opens. It opens by the time this podcast drops. It'll already have opened. It opens Friday. I'm doing almost anything to avoid going to see that. and I'm sorry, Josh, but I'm going to do two in a row
Go
because
ahead.
I have to ask this last question
Yes.
because I ask it every time. So, David, will the Houston Texans make the Super Bowl in the next decade?
Yes. But can I say why? Because my disclaimer is that my entire knowledge on American football is based on having watched Adam Sandler in The Waterboy.
The production room. found that
Yeah,
one pretty funny.
they're loving it. I love that answer. And
You're the first one that said yes, by the way.
yeah, exactly. Everyone that lives in the state says no. And that concludes the lightning round. And so, David, thank you so much for joining us, telling us more about Aker Carbon Capture. The website, I think, are akercarboncapture.com.
Correct, yep. And if you look at the IR part of it, there's a good selection of presentations on there. And there will be, in due course, there'll be more. We're going to put some technology white papers up, obviously for full public consumption. But work in progress, but
Great.
yeah.
If you let us know about that, we'll reattach that to
Sure.
the podcast as
Yeah.
well so people can click on it.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us, David.
Thanks
really
for the
enjoyed
invite.
it.
Absolutely. So that concludes this episode of Energy and Transition Podcast. Dan, thank you for your time. I'm going to pump your Twitter account is at Pickering Energy.
At Pickering Energy.
Yep, for Twitter. Great follow, by the way. PickeringEnergyPartners.com if you want any more information on that. Josh Lowry for Dan and Josh, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming in, and you were great. No jet lag whatsoever. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platforms. We are on YouTube as well. So if you have any questions or comments, email Sarah at sarah.millern@uprightdigital.com, and we'll go from there. Thanks for listening.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you.